The sun begins to dip low on the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the suburban neighborhood. The trees lining the quiet street are just beginning to sway in the evening breeze, the world winding down after another day. Among the homes, one stands out, a modest yet well-kept house where Samantha lives. She is a mother, a survivor, and despite her challenges, a woman of incredible strength. Once active, a tragic accident left her wheelchair-bound, but that has never stopped her from living her life on her terms. Today, like most days, Samantha is out for a walk, well, as much of a walk as her wheelchair allows. With her service dog, Max, by her side, she rolls down the sidewalk, his leash securely held in her hand. Max is more than just a dog. He's her companion, her guide, and in many ways, her reason to keep moving forward. The bond they share is undeniable, a silent understanding between the two of them. Every step they take is a testament to the strength they've built together since the accident. As they make their way down the street, Samantha talks to Max, her voice soft but steady. You know, buddy, I used to run for miles. It seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? She lets out a quiet laugh, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. But we've come a long way, huh? Just you and me walking the streets. She looks at Max, who looks back at her with eyes full of loyalty, the calm reassurance in his presence, a comfort she's come to rely on. They pause for a moment, Samantha gazing at the peaceful neighborhood around them. The scene is serene, a perfect moment of quiet reflection. The sounds of distant birds chirping and the rustling of leaves fill the air, mixing with the faint hum of an approaching car in the distance. It's the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, where time seems to slow down as people walk their dogs, chat with neighbors, and enjoy the simple pleasures of suburban life. Samantha is just another resident here, blending in as she goes about her day. Or, at least, that's what she thinks. From behind the curtains of a house across the street, Karen watches. Her gaze is sharp, calculating as she eyes Samantha from her window. Karen is known in the neighborhood for her sharp tongue, her cold demeanor, and a reputation for stirring trouble. Most people avoid her, but Samantha, ever the optimist, has never paid much attention to the negativity around her. She's learned not to let anyone's judgment define her. But today, something feels different. As Samantha continues her slow journey down the street, Karen mutters something under her breath. Her eyes narrow, her lips curl into a sneer. "Look at her," she hisses, her voice full of contempt. What's she doing out here like that? Just walking her dog, thinking she's normal. Her words are barely audible, but the disdain in her tone is clear. She watches for a few more seconds, eyes flicking over Samantha and Max, before she draws the curtains shut, disappearing from view. The peaceful moment is shattered. Samantha, unaware of the silent judgment cast upon her, continues to roll along, her mind drifting to thoughts of her family, her next goal in therapy, and the next steps in her journey to reclaim her independence. What she doesn't know is that the quiet peace she's enjoying is about to be disrupted, not by anything she can control, but by someone watching from the shadows, ready to make her a target. And with that, the calm evening sets the stage for what is about to unfold, a story of strength, survival, and the fight against an adversary who may not have the physical power to harm her, but will stop at nothing to destroy her peace. The sun is now dipping lower, the last rays casting long shadows over the neighborhood. Samantha continues her steady pace down the sidewalk, the hum of evening activity in the air. Birds flutter in the trees, and the wind whispers through the leaves. But for Samantha, the world feels quiet, serene even in the midst of her otherwise chaotic life. She is no longer a woman defined by her disability, though there are moments when the weight of it lingers, especially in the shadows of her mind. She pushes forward, her wheelchair gliding over the pavement, Max trotting beside her. Unbeknownst to her, Karen is watching again, this time from behind the half-drawn blinds of her living room window. A faint smirk curls at the corner of her lips as she observes Samantha with a keen, unsettling intensity. For Karen, this isn't just a routine glance. It's something deeper, an obsession. Her hand grips the edge of the curtain tightly, her knuckles white as she stares, her eyes narrowing with distaste. In her mind, she has already constructed an entirely different story about Samantha, one that paints her as a threat to the neighborhood. She doesn't care that Samantha is just a woman walking her dog. In Karen's eyes, there's something about the scene, about the very presence of Samantha, that makes her feel uneasy, even dangerous. To her, Samantha's confidence in her wheelchair, walking freely with Max, is something that doesn't belong in her perfect, controlled world. Karen's pulse quickens as an idea forms. A call. She picks up the phone, her fingers dialing 911 with surprising speed, a sense of purpose overtaking her. The words spill out as she speaks into the receiver, her voice sharp and accusing. Yes, I need to report a suspicious person in the neighborhood. There's a woman walking her dog, and she looks dangerous. I don't know what she's up to, but she's just walking down the street, and I think it's suspicious. She shouldn't be here, not like that. The operator on the other end asks for details, but Karen's mind is already spinning out of control, focused solely on getting anyone to take action. Samantha poses a threat, in her mind, a challenge to her control over the neighborhood. As Karen speaks, her voice begins to shake with barely contained frustration. I don't care if she's just walking her dog. She's a danger. She looks like trouble, and she shouldn't be out here. The call ends, but Karen remains standing there, seething with indignation. It's not about Samantha. It never was. It's about the way Karen feels, like someone is violating the world she's so carefully curated. Back on the street, Samantha remains blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind her. She continues her walk, the familiar sound of Max's paws on the pavement comforting her. She talks softly to him, as if to ease the growing tension in her own heart. We've got this, buddy. Just another day. One step at a time. She smiles, despite the weight she feels in her chest, the lingering feeling of being watched, of being judged by others. Her life has never been easy, and her disability is a constant reminder of how far she has to go, how much she must fight to keep her independence. She isn't a fighter by nature, but circumstances have forced her to be one. She knows that the world sometimes doesn't make space for people like her. It doesn't always understand the struggles of a disabled person trying to live a normal life. But Samantha doesn't let that stop her. She won't let it define her. As she glances up, she takes a deep breath. The street is quiet. No one else is out. But still, there's something about today that feels different. The air is thicker somehow, and she senses it in the pit of her stomach, but she pushes it aside, focusing on the task at hand. One step at a time. She pushes forward, feeling the strength of her dog beside her, the warmth of the bond between them. But her thoughts drift to the future, therapy appointments, family dinners, and the hope that one day she will be able to walk again, fully and freely. But the peace is short-lived. From across the street, Karen is watching again, her eyes locking onto Samantha as she passes. This time, the tension in Karen's gaze is palpable, rising, thickening. She leans forward, pressing her face against the window, fingers gripping the edge as if she's about to break it with her stare. Karen can't stand it. She can't stand the sight of Samantha moving forward, living a life that Karen believes she doesn't deserve. Her hands tremble with the kind of energy that only a deep-seated need for control can inspire. She looks down at her phone again. This time, the call is faster, her words more direct. 911 again. You need to send someone out right away. The woman is still walking around, and now she's on my street. She's causing trouble. It's just a matter of time before she does something. She's not right for this neighborhood, I'm telling you. She's dangerous. This time, the operator sounds less patient, but Karen doesn't care. She's already too far gone in her need to make this problem someone else's. The longer Samantha remains out there, the more Karen feels like her control is slipping away. Meanwhile, Samantha reaches the end of the block and turns back to retrace her steps. She pauses for a moment by a tree, taking in the quiet, the calm. Max sits beside her, and she scratches behind his ears. The bond they share is unspoken, but so deeply felt. It's the kind of companionship that makes the world a little less lonely. But as she reaches for her phone to check the time, she feels a shift in the air. The tension that had been lingering beneath the surface is palpable now. The hairs on the back of her neck rise. Suddenly, Karen's voice cuts through the quiet. Hey, what do you think you're doing here? Walking around like that, causing trouble. You've been spotted, and you're making everyone uncomfortable. You need to go home. The words feel like a slap in the face. Samantha turns, startled. Her mouth opens to respond, but her thoughts stumble. The woman who had been watching her from across the street is now standing at the edge of the sidewalk, hands on her hips, glaring at Samantha. There is no warmth in her eyes, only contempt. Karen doesn't care about the struggle, the journey, or the courage it takes for Samantha to even be here today. She only sees a problem that needs to be dealt with. I'm not doing anything, Samantha says, her voice calm but shaking slightly. I'm just walking my dog. Please leave me alone. But Karen doesn't back down. She steps closer, her voice growing louder. You're causing trouble, and you're not welcome here. The confrontation is heating up. Samantha feels a rush of fear, of anger, of confusion. She doesn't understand why Karen is doing this, why she feels so threatened by a woman just trying to live her life. But she knows one thing for certain: something isn't right, and this woman is not going to stop until she's forced Samantha to back down. The weight of Samantha's vulnerability settles deep in her chest as she realizes this moment isn't going to end quietly. The scene unfolds in slow motion, the calm of the suburban street now shattered by the rising tension between Samantha and Karen. Samantha sits quietly on a bench at the corner of the block, her hands resting in her lap, her thoughts drifting toward the events of the day. Max, her loyal service dog, lies peacefully at her feet, his head resting on her lap, his eyes watchful but relaxed. There's an aura of peace around them, a quiet moment after a long day. But the serenity doesn't last. From across the street, Karen steps out of her house, her movements sharp, deliberate. She's wearing a dark jacket, her expression cold, the kind of expression that Samantha has come to recognize as a sign of trouble. In her hand, Karen grips the edge of the fence, her fingers turning white from the pressure. Her gaze locks onto Samantha, and for a moment, there is nothing but a cold silence between them. Samantha's stomach tightens, the hairs on her neck rising, but she tries to ignore the sudden unease creeping up her spine. She's learned to ignore people like Karen, but this time feels different. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Karen's voice is sharp, venomous. She doesn't ask, she accuses. You've been walking around here all week, breaking the rules. You're making people uncomfortable. You have no right to just show up like this, making a scene. Karen's words are harsh, and they hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. Samantha takes a deep breath, pushing herself up from the bench with the assistance of her wheelchair, her calm demeanor unbroken. I'm just walking my dog, she says, her voice even, though her hands are starting to tremble. I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just trying to get out and live my life. But Karen isn't listening. She's too far gone in her mind, already convinced that Samantha doesn't belong here, that her presence is a threat. It's not about you walking your dog. Karen snaps, taking a step forward, her face flushed with anger. You're an outsider, causing a disruption, and you've been doing this for far too long. You don't belong here. Max lifts his head, sensing the change in the air. He growls softly, but Samantha gently places her hand on his head, trying to calm him down. She knows what's coming, the escalation that always follows when Karen gets worked up. She's seen it before, heard the whispers from neighbors about Karen's temper, her obsession with controlling everything in her life. Samantha takes a breath, trying to reason with Karen one last time. Please just let it go. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm just here to live my life, just like anyone else. But Karen doesn't hear her. The distance between them shrinks with every word, every step Karen takes toward Samantha. You're dangerous, Karen spits, her words laced with venom. You're a threat to everyone here. And you need to leave now? Max stands up, his growl becoming more pronounced, but Samantha is frozen, her heart racing. Something in Karen's eyes has changed. There's a fire there now, a dangerous glint. Samantha can feel it deep in her bones. She knows this confrontation is no longer about the neighborhood rules or the dog. It's something more personal. Then it happens. In a blur of motion, Karen pulls a gun from beneath her jacket. The sound of the gun's metal scraping against Karen's body cuts through the tense silence, and time seems to freeze. For a brief moment, Samantha doesn't believe what she's seeing. Her brain can't fully process the image of Karen. This woman she's never had any real interaction with, standing in front of her, a gun pointed at her. It doesn't make sense. Her breath catches in her throat, and she feels the world tilt beneath her. "Stay back." Karen shouts, her voice wild, frantic. "You're dangerous. I'm afraid for my safety. I don't know what you're capable of. You need to leave or I'll—" Max barks loudly, a protective sound, but it's too late. Before Samantha can even react, Karen pulls the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoes down the street, louder than anything Samantha has ever heard. It's deafening. The sharp crack of the bullet cuts through the air, and then pain. A searing, unbearable pain shoots through Samantha's leg. She screams, a guttural sound that tears through her chest as she instinctively cradles her leg, trying to stop the bleeding. The world around her spins, her head swimming, and everything blurs as she feels her body crumple beneath her, the weight of the pain overwhelming her. She stumbles forward, clutching the armrests of her wheelchair, unable to fully comprehend what just happened. Max is barking frantically now, his growls turning into desperate yelps as he lunges toward Karen, his teeth bared. But Karen is unfazed, her focus solely on Samantha, her face twisted into something ugly, something driven by a warped sense of justification. "You should have stayed away," Karen mutters to herself, as Samantha writhes in pain on the pavement. "This is your fault. You forced my hand." Neighbors begin to spill out of their houses, drawn by the gunshot and the screams. Some rush to their phones, others shout for help, but it's too late. Samantha can't hold herself up any longer. The pain is too much. She feels the world slipping away, her vision darkening as her breath comes in short, panicked gasps. Karen stands there, the gun still in her hand, as if it's nothing more than a tool, something she used to make a point, to assert control over a world she doesn't understand. The reality of what she's done seems to hit her slowly, but she's too far gone. She stares at Samantha, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and triumph. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you forced me. You all forced me." By the time Officer Jackson arrives, Karen is still standing there, almost in a trance, the gun now limp in her hand. He stares at the scene in shock, his mind trying to process the chaos before him. He's been called to situations like this before, domestic disputes, angry neighbors, but never anything like this. A woman shot in the street, a peaceful walk turned into a nightmare. "Drop the weapon." Officer Jackson shouts, his voice firm, but there's a hesitation in his steps. He knows he has to act quickly, but the shock of it all is paralyzing. Karen doesn't move. Her eyes are unfocused, staring down at Samantha, who is now bleeding out on the pavement. The neighbors are starting to gather, whispering in disbelief, some shouting for an ambulance, others frozen in terror. The officer moves closer, cautiously, hand on his holster. "Drop the weapon. Now." Karen slowly raises her eyes to meet his. She's almost disoriented, as if waking from a dream. Her lips tremble as she finally drops the gun, the metallic sound echoing in the air. As Officer Jackson approaches Samantha, her breathing is labored, and she's barely conscious. The pain is overwhelming, the blood seeping through her fingers as she clutches her leg, trying desperately to hold onto some semblance of control. "Help! Please!" she whispers, barely able to speak through the agony. The officer calls for backup, his voice urgent. The sound of sirens grows louder in the distance, but Samantha can barely hold on. The world is spinning, her body trembling in shock as she feels herself slip further into unconsciousness. Minutes feel like hours as she is rushed to the hospital, every movement jarring, every breath a battle. She can hear the voices around her, the frantic conversations, the rush of the paramedics, but it all feels so far away. She clings to Max's familiar presence, his barks fading as the pain consumes her. And as Karen is arrested, her hands cuffed, she has no idea what she's done. The weight of her actions has not yet settled in her mind. The damage is done, and for Samantha, the road to recovery is just beginning, both physically and emotionally. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered overhead as Samantha lay in the sterile, white bed. Her leg, wrapped in bandages, was elevated, and the dull ache in her body was a constant reminder of the terrifying day that had changed her life forever. The police had come and gone, taking Karen into custody, but the shock of the attack still hung heavily in the air. Samantha was surrounded by the constant beeping of machines and the murmurs of hospital staff, but her thoughts were far away, swirling in a cyclone of fear, uncertainty, and pain. She had survived the bullet, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting. As she lay there, alone with her thoughts, the investigation had already begun. The room next door was buzzing with activity. Detective Riley, a seasoned officer known for her calm and methodical approach, was the lead investigator on the case. She sat behind her desk, staring at the report in front of her. It was as if the evidence was already piecing together in her mind, but there was one key thing missing: the motive. Why would Karen, a woman who seemed to be a part of the quiet suburban neighborhood, snap in such a violent manner? Detective Riley wasn't one to rush into conclusions. She knew there had to be something more beneath the surface. As she reviewed the statements from the officers who had responded to the scene, she felt a growing unease. The more she read, the more it seemed like there was something about Karen that didn't add up. The calm, composed woman who had shot Samantha in the middle of the street wasn't a random act of violence. This had been brewing for a long time. A quick background check on Karen revealed some troubling information. Her record, though not criminal, was dotted with incidents. Neighbors had described her as difficult, demanding, and controlling. But there was something else. As Detective Riley dove deeper, she discovered an unsettling pattern. Karen had a long history of clashes with neighbors, especially those who didn't meet her standards of what the neighborhood should be. But the most disturbing thing she found was that Karen had an obsession with controlling the people around her, particularly those with vulnerabilities. There were whispers, rumors even, of Karen's treatment of other disabled individuals in the neighborhood. A woman named Linda, who had lived just 2 doors down from Karen for over 5 years, came forward with a chilling account of her own encounter with Karen. According to Linda, Karen had always been vocal about her disdain for people like Samantha. She's always had a problem with people who don't fit into her perfect neighborhood, Linda explained in an interview with Detective Riley. She used to tell me that people like Samantha were a blight on the street, that they made everything look bad. She's always been like that. The more Detective Riley dug into Karen's past, the clearer it became that Karen had been systematically isolating herself from anyone who didn't fit her ideal version of the world. She had alienated neighbors, manipulated situations to make herself look like a victim, and used her charm and authority to get away with it all. This wasn't just a case of road rage or a spontaneous outburst. This was premeditated, the result of years of resentment bubbling beneath the surface. The investigation took an even darker turn when Detective Riley found a series of emails that Karen had sent to other residents in the neighborhood over the years. In these emails, Karen would often complain about the presence of people with disabilities or those who were different. She had once even written to the neighborhood association, demanding that a disabled woman be removed from a local community event because Karen felt her presence was disturbing. The more Detective Riley uncovered, the more it seemed that Karen had an ongoing vendetta against anyone she deemed less than perfect. But what really struck Detective Riley was a particular conversation she found between Karen and a former neighbor, Tom, who had lived next to Karen for nearly a decade before moving away. Tom described a particularly disturbing interaction where Karen had gotten into a heated argument with Samantha over something trivial. It was ridiculous, Tom recalled, Karen was yelling at Samantha about her dog, claiming it was ruining the neighborhood. I had never seen Karen so upset. And then Samantha just walked away as calm as ever, but you could see she was shaken. I always wondered what that was about. Now it makes sense. The more Detective Riley uncovered, the more it became clear. Karen had been plotting something for a long time. Her fixation on Samantha wasn't just about the dog walk. It was personal, and that made Samantha's life a target. Back at the hospital, Samantha was struggling to process everything. The pain in her leg was constant, but it was the emotional toll that was taking its hardest hit. Her family and friends had been rallying around her, trying to offer comfort. But the fear of Karen getting away with it lingered in her mind. She couldn't help but worry that Karen, with her manipulative ways, might find a way to twist the story in her favor. Tom, the former neighbor, had already spoken with the police, offering his account of the argument between Samantha and Karen. However, Samantha knew that Karen had a way of weaving her own narrative, making herself appear innocent while painting others as the villains. The idea of Karen somehow getting away with what she had done terrified Samantha. Detective Riley spent hours in the hospital talking to Samantha when she was strong enough to speak. Each conversation revealed more about Samantha's fears and the emotional scars the attack had left. She was scared of the idea that Karen could walk away from this unscathed and continue to terrorize the neighborhood. Samantha felt like she was just another name on Karen's long list of victims. She knew Karen's tactics, knew how she manipulated the system, and that was the thing that kept her awake at night. As Detective Riley continued to work, the suspense built to an unbearable level. The investigation was solid, the evidence mounting against Karen, but there were still cracks in the case that Karen might exploit. Samantha was unsure if she could trust the justice system to get it right. She had seen too many times how people like Karen managed to slip through the cracks. Karen's lawyer had already begun crafting a defense, calling the incident an act of self-defense, claiming that Samantha had somehow provoked her. The more Samantha thought about it, the more it made her stomach turn. It felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But Detective Riley wasn't about to let that happen. She spent late nights cross-referencing Karen's history with every incident, every confrontation that had occurred over the years. Each piece of the puzzle came together. The more Karen's background was exposed, the clearer it became that this wasn't a random act of violence. This was the culmination of years of hate, resentment, and control. The case was far from over. The twists and turns kept coming. But Samantha knew one thing for sure. Karen was going to pay for what she had done. The world had tilted the moment the bullet entered Samantha's leg, but the days following her attack felt like a slow spiral into chaos. The physical pain from her injury, though still present, was bearable compared to the emotional and psychological toll the incident had taken on her. As her leg healed, so too did the raw nerves of trauma that had been seared into her mind. It wasn't just the attack itself, though that was enough to rattle anyone to their core. It was the fear that Karen, a woman so seemingly harmless in her facade, might still have control over her life, might find a way to turn everything around and make Samantha the villain. What Samantha didn't realize yet as she tried to rebuild her life in the aftermath of the shooting was that the danger wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. Karen was a master manipulator. Once the initial shock of the police intervention had subsided, she started to build her case in the only way she knew how, through her words. But this time, she was armed with something more dangerous than just her sharp tongue. She had the power of the media. The first sign of trouble came when Samantha started to notice strange activity online. Karen had begun posting videos on her social media platforms, videos that painted herself as a victim of Samantha's dangerous behavior. In these videos, Karen detailed how she had been forced to take action after Samantha had threatened her. She made it seem as though the entire neighborhood was at risk because of Samantha and Max, her service dog. According to Karen, the attack had been an act of self-defense, a necessary measure taken to protect her property and her peace. The manipulation was subtle but effective. Karen had the ability to twist the narrative spinning lies with such conviction that even the most skeptical among the neighborhood began to question Samantha's story. The videos were crafted with care, framing Samantha as a danger even as she remained silent. The commentary from Karen was calculated. She discussed the past problems she'd had with Samantha, leaving out all the context, and portrayed herself as a woman who had been pushed to the brink. Karen's manipulation was working. At first, it was just a few comments from the neighborhood. People who had known Samantha for years began to express doubts, questions about Samantha's behavior, her motives, the real circumstances surrounding the shooting. Small groups of residents whispered about the incident when they thought Samantha couldn't hear. These comments turned into full-blown debates, with some defending Samantha and others turning their backs on her. The ripple effect in the community was unsettling. Tom, the former neighbor who had spoken to the police about Karen's past, called Samantha one evening, his voice filled with concern. "I've been hearing things, Sam," he said, his tone grim. "The neighborhood's starting to buy into Karen's story. People are saying you provoked her somehow. It's like they're not seeing what really happened." Tom's words were a punch to the gut. Samantha couldn't believe it. Karen had turned the entire neighborhood against her. The voices of support that had once surrounded her seemed to grow fainter with each passing day. Samantha felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting, and she had no control over the direction it was taking. It wasn't just the community's doubts that were suffocating her. It was the realization that Karen had found a way to turn this into a war of perception, and Samantha was losing. As the media frenzy surrounding the incident grew, Karen's influence spread far beyond the neighborhood. She began talking to news outlets, giving interviews that painted her as the victim of an out-of-control situation. Some people sympathized with Karen, and her story gained traction. In the public eye, the lines between right and wrong began to blur. Even the local news began covering the story, quoting Karen's version of events while giving Samantha little more than a passing mention as the woman who had been shot by her neighbor. To make matters worse, the psychological toll was far worse than the physical pain Samantha had endured. The nightmares came first. Samantha would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her heart racing as she relived the moment Karen shot her. The vivid images of Karen standing over her, the sound of the gunshot ringing in her ears, replayed over and over again. She couldn't escape it. Even in her waking hours, the images haunted her thoughts. She would find herself freezing when she walked outside, her mind snapping back to the fear that had gripped her when she was on the ground, the world spinning as she bled out. Max had become her anchor during the worst moments. He was always there, quietly sitting by her side, offering her the comfort only an animal companion could give. But the emotional scars were growing deeper by the day. Samantha began to isolate herself. She spent hours in her room, staring at the walls, unable to summon the strength to face the world outside. The world felt hostile. It wasn't just Karen anymore. It was everyone who had begun to doubt her, to question her truth. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, Samantha came home to a note slipped under her door. At first, she thought it was just another piece of hate mail, something from one of the neighbors who had started turning against her. But as she read the words scrawled on the paper, her blood ran cold. The note read, "You think you can hide? You've made a mistake. You've never been safe. No one is safe, not even your family." It was signed only with a single letter, K. Her heart pounded as she read the words over and over. There was no mistaking it. This was a direct threat. It was clear that Karen wasn't finished with her. The note was an unsettling confirmation of her deepest fear. Karen was coming for her again, this time in a much more dangerous way. Days passed, and things only got worse. Samantha began receiving more threats, and they were more personal. The messages became more frequent, each one escalating in its intensity. Someone was watching her. She could feel it. Her family felt it too. They began to notice strange cars parked near their house at odd hours of the day, people lingering on the street corners. Max would bark at random times, his behavior growing more agitated, as if he could sense something lurking in the shadows. Then, one night, as Samantha was returning home from an appointment, She noticed someone following her. It wasn't the usual cars passing by, but a dark figure trailing just behind her as she wheeled herself down the sidewalk. The figure stayed far enough behind not to be noticed at first, but close enough to make her skin crawl. When she turned down an alleyway, she noticed the figure had also turned, closing the distance between them. Max was at her side, his hackles raised. He growled low, his eyes focused on the figure behind them. The air felt thick, and every sound seemed amplified in the night. Samantha pushed forward, her heart racing, her palms sweating. She gripped the wheels of her chair, her mind spinning, trying to figure out what to do. Her family had warned her to stay vigilant, but now, in the quiet of the night, it felt like everything she'd feared was becoming real. She turned sharply, heading for the nearest well-lit street. The figure didn't follow her directly, but lingered just out of sight. When she reached the main road, she turned around to see the figure slip into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The next day, Samantha's worst fears were confirmed. Her family's house had been broken into. Nothing had been stolen, but the feeling of violation was overwhelming. The place she once considered a sanctuary was no longer safe. It was clear now, Karen wasn't just trying to terrorize her mentally, she was orchestrating this campaign of fear to regain control. She was trying to break Samantha down, piece by piece. The truth settled in with a cold finality. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was an obsessive force, and Samantha was trapped in her web. Samantha had become the enemy in Karen's mind, and there was no end in sight. The threat now loomed over Samantha and her family. Every day felt like walking on a razor's edge, as if one misstep could bring the entire nightmare crashing down on her. But Samantha wasn't going to let Karen win. She couldn't afford to. Not now. Not after everything. But the fight ahead was going to be long, painful, and fraught with danger. Karen had shown her just how far she was willing to go. And Samantha was ready to face it, even if it meant taking back her life piece by piece. The courthouse was packed. The usual buzz of people, lawyers, witnesses, and reporters filled the air, each person glued to their phones or in hushed conversations. Samantha sat near the back, her eyes fixed on the front of the room where the judge sat. Today was the day. After weeks of uncertainty, she would face Karen head-on in the courtroom, a battleground where the truth would finally come to light. The last few months had been a blur for Samantha. Her physical recovery had been slow and painful, but it was her emotional healing that had been the hardest. The weight of Karen's manipulation, the constant threats, the harassment, it had all taken its toll. But now, standing tall in her wheelchair, Samantha felt a strength inside her that she hadn't realized she still had. She had spent so many nights doubting herself, questioning if she was worthy of fighting for justice. But in this moment, she knew she was ready. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone Karen had ever hurt, and for the people who would never be able to stand up to someone like Karen. Across the room, Karen sat with her lawyer, her posture as rigid as ever. She was wearing a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled, and her expression carefully composed. The mask she had worn for so long was intact, and Samantha could see the familiar, calculated look in her eyes. Karen was trying to control the narrative once again. Samantha's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained composed. She would not let Karen manipulate this moment. Not today. The judge entered the courtroom, his robe flowing as he took his seat at the bench. The room quieted instantly, and all eyes turned to him. Samantha held her breath. This was it, the moment everything would come to a head. Samantha Carter, the victim in this case, is now called to testify, the judge announced. Karen's lawyer turned to her, whispering something in her ear before standing up and giving a small nod. Samantha steadied herself and wheeled herself toward the witness stand. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair tightly, but her legs felt weak beneath her. This wasn't just another day. It was the culmination of everything that had been done to her, everything Karen had tried to take from her. But this time, Samantha had something she hadn't had before: power. As she settled into the chair, she could feel Karen's eyes on her, sharp and unblinking. There was a moment of silence as everyone waited for the first question. Samantha took a deep breath, focusing on the judge as he addressed her. "Samantha Carter," the judge began, his voice stern yet kind. "Please tell the court what happened on the day of the incident. What led to the events that transpired?" For a moment, Samantha hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to steady her breathing. She had practiced this 1,000 times in her head. She had lived it. This was her truth. It was a regular day, she began, her voice steady. "I was walking my dog, just like I had done many times before. I was on the sidewalk near my house when Karen came out and started yelling at me. I had no idea what was going on at first. I tried to explain that I wasn't causing any trouble, but Karen was insistent that I didn't belong in the neighborhood." She paused, the memory of that moment flooding back, Karen's cold, accusing words, the way she had stepped closer with her eyes full of hatred. But Samantha didn't let herself falter. She needed to stay strong, to show the court that she had not been the aggressor. "The argument escalated quickly," Samantha continued. "Karen started shouting at me, saying that people like me had no place here. I tried to walk away, but she blocked my path. She told me I needed to leave, and when I didn't comply, she pulled a gun." A hushed silence fell over the courtroom. The shock was palpable. The courtroom had heard of the events surrounding the shooting, but hearing it from Samantha herself was a different matter altogether. Samantha took another deep breath. She could feel the weight of Karen's gaze, but she refused to look at her. She would not be intimidated. "Not today. I beg her to stop. I told her I was just walking my dog, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But then she shot me," Samantha finished, her voice trembling only slightly as she relived the horror of that moment. "I was in shock. I couldn't move. I thought I was going to die." The room was silent for a long moment. Samantha could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on her, their sympathy tangible. But it was Karen's reaction that sent a chill down her spine. Karen's face was impassive, as though she had heard nothing, as though it had all been someone else's problem. Her mask was still in place, but Samantha could see the flicker of panic in Karen's eyes. The defense lawyer rose to cross-examine Samantha. His suit was impeccably tailored, his demeanor one of practiced calm. He was the type of lawyer who knew how to twist words to make everything seem uncertain. He approached the stand with an air of superiority, as if this was just another case to win. "Samantha," he began, his tone condescending, "you say that Karen shot you, but how can you be sure that it wasn't in self-defense? After all, you had a dog with you. How do we know you weren't the one who provoked her?" "I didn't provoke her," Samantha said firmly, meeting his eyes. "Karen made the first move. She was the one who started shouting at me. And I was never a threat to her. I was simply trying to walk down the street like anyone else." The defense lawyer smiled thinly, clearly not expecting such a straightforward answer. "But you do admit that you've had previous confrontations with Karen, don't you?" "We had never spoken before that day," Samantha replied, her voice unwavering. "But I know from the other neighbors that Karen has a history of bullying people, especially those with disabilities. She has been causing problems for years, and everyone knew it. But I never thought she would go this far." The defense lawyer paused, as if considering his next move. He seemed to weigh the situation before deciding to push further. "Isn't it possible that Karen felt threatened by you?" he asked, his voice gaining a hint of manipulation. "You're in a wheelchair and you have a dog with you. Couldn't that have made her feel unsafe?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, the room felt suffocating. Samantha knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to cast doubt on her credibility, to make it seem like Karen had acted out of fear. But Samantha wouldn't let that happen. She had seen Karen's true colors, and she wasn't afraid to expose them. "Karen was never afraid of me," Samantha shot back, her voice steady. "She was afraid of losing control. She's been trying to control this neighborhood for years, and when I didn't fit into her vision of what was acceptable, she took matters into her own hands. She doesn't care about who she hurts. She just wants to be in charge." The defense lawyer faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. He tried one last time to discredit Samantha, But the damage had already been done. The truth was out. Karen wasn't just a woman who had been pushed to the edge. She was a woman who had been manipulating, controlling, and hurting others for years, and now the world knew it. The court was called to a brief recess, and Samantha wheeled herself out of the courtroom, her heart racing. Her family gathered around her, their faces filled with pride and support. It was the first time in months that Samantha felt truly seen, truly heard. The battle wasn't over, but it felt like a turning point. As Samantha returned to the stand for the final testimony, the truth was undeniable. Her family had uncovered Karen's abusive past, her manipulative tactics, and her obsession with control. The evidence was irrefutable. Karen had not only shot Samantha, but had been systematically terrorizing the neighborhood for years. There was no more room for doubt. In the final moments of the trial, Samantha stood before the judge, her heart pounding, the weight of everything finally lifting. She had fought for her life, for justice, and now it was time to see it through. The judge's gavel fell, and the room went silent. The verdict was clear. Karen was convicted of assault with intent to harm, and the courtroom erupted in applause. Samantha had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced by someone like Karen. As Samantha wheeled herself out of the courtroom, she felt a quiet victory settle within her. The strength of her family, her friends, and the community had carried her to this moment. She had faced her greatest fear, and she had emerged victorious. Karen's reign of terror was over, and for the first time in a long while, Samantha felt like she could finally breathe. Months had passed since the trial, and the physical and emotional scars of the shooting were slowly beginning to heal. Samantha's leg had recovered, though the memory of that day would forever be etched into her mind. She wasn't the same person she had been before the attack, but she wasn't the same in a way that made her stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to live a life full of purpose. Max, her loyal service dog, had been by her side every step of the way. He was more than just a companion. He had become a symbol of her strength and recovery. They had been through so much together, and now, as Samantha sat in her wheelchair, her hands resting on the armrests, she could feel the power of the bond between them. She wasn't just a woman who had survived an attack, she was someone who had fought to regain her independence, to live her life on her own terms. It was a warm, sunny morning when Samantha and Max ventured outside once again. She had started physical therapy to regain strength, not just in her body, but in her heart. The road had been long and difficult, but Samantha was determined to push forward. She wheeled herself along the sidewalk, feeling the familiar breeze on her face, the comforting rhythm of Max's paws against the pavement. The world had changed since that day in the street, but in this moment, everything felt as it should be, peaceful, quiet, and full of possibility. As she passed by the houses of her neighbors, she noticed the small changes in the neighborhood. The whispers had died down, and while some remained cautious, many had started to see the truth about Karen, the woman who had once controlled the community through fear and manipulation. Now, Karen's name was tarnished forever, her lies exposed, and the community had begun to heal. The darkness that Karen had cast over their lives had started to dissipate, replaced by a sense of unity. It wasn't easy and it would take time, but there was a new feeling of hope in the air. That evening, Samantha sat down with her camera, something she had avoided doing in the past months. She had kept her story private for so long, but now she felt the need to share it with the world. She needed to let others know that no matter what life threw at them, they could overcome it. She took a deep breath, her fingers gently brushing the camera lens as she looked into the screen. "Hey, everyone," Samantha began, her voice strong but gentle. "I know I've been away for a while, but today I want to share something important. The last few months have been the hardest of my life. I faced things I never thought I'd have to face, and there were days when I didn't know how I'd make it through. But here I am still standing." She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "The thing I've learned through all of this is that no one, not even the darkest forces, not even people who try to tear you down, has the power to control your life unless you let them. There were moments when I felt like giving up, when I felt like I couldn't go on, but I chose to fight, not for anyone else, but for me, for my future, for my freedom. And you can do that too. No matter what you've been through, no matter how impossible it seems, you have the power to reclaim your life. Samantha smiled as she continued, her eyes filled with emotion. It's not about how hard you fall, it's about how many times you get back up. And I'm still standing. I'm still here. And so are you. As she finished recording, Samantha felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had shared her truth, and in doing so, she had helped herself heal even more. Her journey wasn't over, but it was no longer defined by the trauma of the past. She had taken control of her own narrative, and in that process, she had found strength and purpose. The video ended with a quiet shot of Samantha and Max walking down the street, her wheelchair moving steadily forward. It wasn't the smoothest journey. There were bumps along the road, both literal and figurative, but with each turn, Samantha proved that she was more than capable of overcoming anything that came her way. Her emotional scars were still there, and she knew they always would be. But they no longer had the power to hold her back. They were a part of her story, but they did not define her. As Samantha wheeled herself away from the camera, her family and friends gathered around her, their support unwavering. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the neighborhood that had once felt so hostile. Now it felt like home again. The community had learned from the darkness Karen had brought into their lives, and together they had started to rebuild, stronger, kinder, and more united than ever before. And for Samantha, as she walked beside Max, the future seemed brighter. The path ahead was filled with possibilities. The attack had changed her life, but it had also given her something she never expected. A deeper sense of self, a greater appreciation for her strength, and the knowledge that no matter what happened next, she had the power to overcome. With Max at her side, she was ready to face whatever came next, because she knew now that nothing, not even the most terrifying of threats, could ever take away her ability to move forward. The video ended on a quiet, uplifting note, with Samantha smiling softly, at peace with herself and her journey. It was a moment of triumph. Not just over the events that had happened, but over the belief that she could and would continue to thrive. The past no longer controlled her. She did, and that was the greatest victory of all. If Samantha's story has inspired you, don't let fear or doubt hold you back from your own journey. You are stronger than you think, and no challenge is too great to overcome. If you've faced obstacles, whether physical, emotional, or mental, remember that you have the power to rise above them. Share your story. Take that first step and let your strength be the light that guides others. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience, strength, and transformation. Let's continue this journey together. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. Keep moving forward because your story is far from over.